and we have a responsibility to uphold our government. I'm not looking to become an anarchist. And so I want to recognize that government, which I feel is most responsible for this area, and which will be Mojave County. And so until Mojave County kind of gets up to speed, I've determined from starting here at this point forward that I will send to Mojave County, our supervisor is Gary Watson, that I'm going to send 2.5% of my gross off of all my production to Mojave County until they get up to speed and ask for less or more, but it will be a production tax. I'm not going to change one landlord over for another landlord. Again, these rights don't exist because there's a federal government or a state government or a county government. They're sole and separate and independent. But I have a responsibility to give back to where I live, and so I will send a check at the end of the year to Mojave County, 2.5% of anything I've made.
Okay. Well, there goes the argument that, see, you're going to be a freeloader too. No, you're not. You'll continue making improvements on the land. You'll continue to do things as you've done, just without the BLM as your
my landlord.
Okay, got it.
Yes.
Let's go back to the phone. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Good afternoon. How are you today?
I think we're doing well. And you?
I'm doing pretty good, but the last lady that called, I have to answer. I'm sorry. I'm going to try and be very respectful. But I was out on that land about a year ago, and I saw what those wild horses were doing to that land. I'm up in Beaver County, and to put it simply, those horses had beat the ground right at the dirt. I mean, the ground was bare dirt. There was nothing there. And if those horses aren't dealt with, we're going to have a massive die-off some winter. I won't say it'll be this winter, I won't say it'll be next winter, but it will happen if they're not taken care of.
And the range will be damaged.
And the range is badly damaged already. I was out there, I saw it.
Very good. And see, this is where when a rancher would have kept that in balance. Had he stood up and been left alone to manage that, he would not have letting that gotten out of control.
Well, he was unable to.
Right.
It happens to be a friend of mine, as a matter of fact.
Right.
And I was out there on some business dealings and this and that, and his hands are tied. The BLM is
correct.
Is harassing him to the point that he can't operate. It cost him, I think the figure he gave me was $100,000 last year in hay because of the wild horses out there. That is quite a chunk.
Right, and again, you have good range cons that are fighting to keep in the BLM, fighting to keep grazing available, but there is a war inside the BLM. There are those that have come in more newly into the organization, and their intent is to get all grazing off of the land. And so they will use any angle necessary, whether it be an owl, whether it be a tortoise, whether it be a cactus, whether it be a wild horse. Their intent is to get the grazing ended, to get the ranchers off the land. And they will disguise it with all other good-feeling issues to try to get the public to climb on board.
Okay. Thank you so much for the call. I want to move on here. 844-805-8255. Rick, welcome to the show.
I believe that they call government overbearing and interference, especially with private industry, communism. However, I appreciate what you're doing, sir. I couldn't get much of the show, but are you familiar with land patents?
A little bit. I'm not a big legal expert, but
no, you don't have to be a big legal expert. These go back to treaty law before the Constitution. I suggest you boys look into that, because basically what happens if you get a land patent, it's yours.
Yes.
You don't brook any interference. Now, some counties, including this one, I'm having a bit of a tiff with our local assessor, who swore an allegiance to the Constitution, which he couldn't recite for me, and claims to uphold it. And even though I have a land patent and some of the other my friends out here have land patents, the object is to try and get us into court, make us pay ridiculous legal fees, and break us and then confiscate our property. That's in other parts of the country. So what we're going to do, among other things, is go through federal court and also use something called Haffer versus Mello, 1991 Supreme Court of the United States.
Okay, I'm unfamiliar with that.
Well, you should be, because what Haffer versus Mello does, and you can look it up, not only can you sue the involved that's harassing you, you can also sue the individual because they are actors for that agency, and that was quite a landmark ruling. I used that over in California to go after Child Protective Services very, very successfully. So I suggest you look up the Haffer versus Mello thing, Supreme Court 1991, and that you guys also start looking into land patents, and then start looking at if you get any crap from your local government, tell them, okay, you want to play that game. Since land patents are a federal issue, we're going to take you to federal court directly. We're not even going to bother with you.
Okay, I think I want to kind of jump in here a little bit. Let's go ahead and come back to kind of the issues that let's not jump into the federal court. You jump into federal court, thereby you are stating by your actions that the federal government does indeed have right and responsibility to intervene in the lands of the state.
No, you're not. What you're doing is you're going into federal court on land patents because land patents are a federal were put in place by the Founding Fathers as a federal guarantee that every man's property would be his kingdom.
Well, I would have to look into that more, so you may be right on that.
Okay, Rick, thank you. I want to get one more call in before we hit the break. Mike, welcome to the show.
Hello, Brian. Thank you for taking up such an important topic. You know, there's so much misinformation floating around about what really is and is not, for example, federal land. Federal land is just a meaningless term that we've accepted because it's been used for 100 years to describe public lands and change the definition of the meaning or the understanding of the public mind that land actually belongs to the federal government when the U.S. Constitution is very clear and very restrictive about the land that the federal government can own. Mm-hmm. There was a report in 1784 called the see, I remember what it was. It was the Report of Government for the Western Territories, April 23rd, 1784, which used the term equal footing.
Yes.
You'll find equal footing in the California Enabling Act, the Utah, the Arizona Enabling Act. The problem is that the Nevada Enabling Act is vastly different. It's very, very problematic. But what that means, of course, is that the establishment of states and permanent government therein provides for their admission to a share in the federal councils and on an equal footing with the original states. Mm-hmm. And it goes even further to say that it should be in all respects whatsoever, this equal footing. So what has happened, of course, is that the feds stole the land through theft by withholding is the only way I can describe it. By withholding it from the states when they became states. And that land the Fed has no claim whatsoever on it. None whatsoever. They can call it federal land, they can put together organizations, they can try to force you and me off of it, but it simply doesn't hold water. It only has force and effect because of courts, guns, and jails.
Yes.
And if you want a really good explanation, you'll find it in the library there in Cedar City and in every library from Nephi South and Highway 89 West, because I dropped them off there at the public libraries personally. The book is written by William Hayward, and it's called How the West Was Lost.
I agree with your representation. I think you're accurate.
Okay, Mike, thank you so much for the call. Again, we're talking with LaVoy Finicum. When we come back, LaVoy, I want to talk about something that I think will cause some people to really think. You are saying we live in a post-constitutional society. In other words, a political solution, a legislative solution is not likely to solve our problem. Okay, we'll continue our conversation just the other side of these messages.
This is the HD Radio Show.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome to the HD Radio Show. My guest in studio with me today is LaVoy Finicum, and we are talking about property rights. We're talking about grazing rights. LaVoy is a rancher, and he is a friend and also a contemporary of Cliven Bundy, who, you know, I think a lot of people have a very negative opinion of Cliven Bundy, mainly because all their information has come from some media source, and they have no real firsthand knowledge either of the man or of the situation. Now, LaVoy has been explaining to us the difference between natural rights and government-created rights, and I know that I'm sure some people were a little bit astonished to hear you say, even though you are current with all of your agreements and your fees and everything, yes, you are severing your association with the B.L.M. You will be paying a 2.5% production tax on gross sales of all livestock to your county.
Yes.
And now, have you talked to your county supervisor? Have you talked to your sheriff?
No, I haven't. That's everything's in motion. I actually drafted yesterday a letter to my range cons expressing my appreciation to them, and to personally explain to them that I don't mean this to be an attack against them, and that I have appreciated working with them and their friendship, because I do consider them friends. And so, no, everything is moving forward, and we're figuring it out as we go.
Talk to me about the American Lands Council and Ken Ivory and Doug Heaton. I know they have done a lot of work,
yes,
to getting those public lands returned to the control of the state. What are your thoughts on this issue?
Actually, Doug Heaton contacted me. Ken Ivory works for Doug Heaton. Doug Heaton is the King County commissioner, and I judge him to be a great man, a fighter and defender of freedom. I have a lot of respect for him. We differ on some fundamental things. Our heart and goal is the same direction, but I'll try to do the best I can to maybe highlight a couple of the differences. One, he feels like that the land does belong to the federal government, and that the federal government has just violated their responsibility to dispose of the land back to the people, and therefore he has got a movement, the American Lands Council, to by litigation to force the federal government to live up to what he considers their constitutional responsibilities. I do agree with them. The federal government, in this respect, that the federal government was supposed to dispose of this land and not hold on to it. But the problem I have with it, he says, well, you know, we got to do this politically, and so therefore we'll compromise with the feds. You can have all the parks, all the monuments, and all the wilderness area. Just please give us back the rest. And I said, well, Doug, well, thanks. You're throwing me to the wolves. Yeah, I'm on monument and I'm on wilderness area. So why are you going to sacrifice me for the good of the many? You've got to be true and consistent with your principles. Again, when the rubber hits the road, Doug Heaton is going to be on freedom's side, and so I stand with Doug Heaton in this fight. But it will not be solved through the legislative process. Nevada had a great groundswell after this to try to legislatively get this to happen, and they'd come right up to the very moment, and then it gets so diluted, polluted, and twisted that they themselves have to kill the bill. And the federal government, I promise you this, the federal government will not let go of any of these lands, no matter what you do legislatively, and you cannot litigate this and get it back. They'll string you along and keep you in court, and you think you're going to get some steam and some headways, but they will not let go of it. I can promise you that. Okay, so how will our freedoms, how will the rule of law be saved? Well, everything, when the government begins to become anarchist in their behaviors, and begin to disregard the rule of law, which is the Constitution and the parameters and intent that was placed upon them, then eventually things break down to natural law. And that means when you know that you were first in line and that this spot in the line is mine, then you must hold that line. And so this will not be solved in a political way. It will not be solved in Washington. But it will be solved. It will succeed because the Constitution, or the principles of the Constitution, burns and exist in the hearts of freedom-loving Americans. And when they understand the principle to be right, when they understand the moral cause to be just, there are those that will stand up. And so it will be saved, but it will be saved by the citizens, not by the politicians. So you might ask, well, what is the role of the politician? Well, there is a role for it now. Stepping back just a little bit here, I have been told that on the Niagara River, there is a line or a point that's called the point of no return, which when you get past that point on a boat, that you cannot, the current is so fast that you cannot turn it around. And we've long passed the point of no return in being able to turn this federal government back and around. But it will be saved by the individual citizens that believes in freedom. And the principles are simple. Leave me alone, I'll leave you alone. Respect my life, liberty, and property. I'll respect your life, liberty, and property.
See, that's what I wanted to ask you. You're not advocating violent separation here. What you're saying is the individual citizens who value their freedom and who are willing to stand up, and that sounds pretty simple when you say, well, sure, I'll stand up. No. You want to talk about what it costs to stand up? Put yourself in the shoes of the Bundy family. And would you be willing to suffer that kind of a public smear and disinformation campaign in order to stand for what you believed was right? And
threat against your life. Real, incredible threat against your life. And maybe I can make a couple points here. Please, I hope I don't offend. I do not mean to offend, but I'm going to say it as I see it. On that morning, when I sat there on my horse, watching the Cowboys saddle up and talking back and forth, and reporters getting there. There one particular Cowboy, I don't know his name, but he was first and foremost getting in front of the reporters. He was doing the most, poking holes in the air with his finger, decrying the evil overreaches of the B.L.M. and stuff. And he sounded like, man, he is. Boy, he believes this. And so, anyway, we ride across, we're up on the ridge, and then Cliven starts talking, and he's talking about, what are we going to do? Are we going to go get our cows? And this guy, we'll call him a Cowboy, was sitting next to me on his horse. And the more Cliven talked about doing something, and see, this was my fear. We are going to ride across that bridge in a parade, toting all these flags. We're all going to say some words, and we're going to then all get on horses and ride back across there, toting our flags, load up horses, and go home. That is. So did not want that to happen. Don't waste our time if that was going to happen. Well, anyway, Cliven's talking, and the guy's starting to get very nervous, and he starts saying, "Oh, Cliven, you can't say that. Oh, Cliven, you can't do that. Somebody's going to get hurt. Cliven." And so I can see the anxiety rising up in him, and so I lean over, trying to alleviate some of this anxiety. I say, "Hey, it's okay. I said, we all die. Might as well die for something." Oh, that was the wrong thing to say. He could not abide that. And when we left, he rode the other way. The point I'm making is, please do not stand up and start spouting off. Please do not stand up and start poking holes in the air with your finger unless you really believe where you stand and you're willing to ride this thing to the end, because you will hurt the cause if you then all of a sudden, when the pressure comes, you begin to fold and buckle. But if you stand, other Americans will stand with you. They will come from everywhere. And if they believe your cause to be just simple people from every walk of life will come.
Okay, we've got about a minute. And Kevin, go ahead. You're on the air.
All right, thank you. Just thinking about what earlier caller said about the Mustangs and things like that, and I'm thinking, well, these ranchers have put all these improvements in the land to make it so that they can support more animals, and as a byproduct of that, they can support more deer and elk and Mustangs too. Mm-hmm. But the thing is because they can support more animals, the Mustang herds, all that increases, and then those Mustang herds are causing problems with the land, making it so that it can't any longer support stuff because they're getting enough water now, but they're eating, because the herd is growing so large, they're eating everything else. I think that let's leave the herds about the same size or a little larger than they would have originally been, which wasn't very many, and let the rancher reap the increase.
Okay, I got to stop you here, Kevin. We're up against the clock. We'll be back with LaVoy Finicum right after this.
The radio show that gets you thinking in high definition. HD Radio with Brian Hyde.
Good afternoon and welcome to the HD Radio Show. I am on the air with LaVoy Finicum, and we're talking about ranching. We're talking about public lands. We're talking about what was that big kerfuffle down in Bunkerville last year. And I don't think anybody's given me a better explanation here than you have, LaVoy. And I know you wanted to respond to the last caller before we went to break, who was asking about the horses and the improvements, whether those benefit the horses, and some of the management questions. What did you want to say?
We need to go back to principle. This whole issue with your wild horses up here would be resolved if you stood on principle. The principle is that forage, that grazing right, belongs to that rancher. Now, if we keep going to the B.L.M. saying, oh, please do something about the horses, you're therefore acknowledged that the federal government, in fact, has right and control of this property. And if that is your position, then we need to quit whining about it, because we just need to accept what the overlord has to say. But if these are grazing rights, and if the county and the rancher, this issue with too many wild horses would have been resolved a long time ago. Now, every rancher that I know of is connected with the Old West. When I was up on the 50-mile mountain up there's some wild horses running up there. I love to see them. And I know for myself, I don't mind having several horses running wild on my range. I love to see that. But that forage is mine. If they start getting out of control, I will manage it. I will keep that herd in control. But that right belongs to that rancher.
Okay, let's go back to the phone. Susan, thank you for holding on. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. Enjoying listening to Mr. Finicum today, and I want to extrapolate from this topic just a little bit by suggesting a book to all your listeners who are interested in reclaiming liberty, and it's by Charles Murray, and it's called By the People, Rebuilding Liberty Without Permission. I haven't read the book yet, but I've heard him talking about it on Book TV, and so I know a little bit about the content. And, to extrapolate from the issue of the B.L.M, we really have tyranny by the executive branch agencies in throughout the government. And, for instance, the RICO statutes that have gone way beyond the original intent of the law, which was to go after organized crime. And, my daughter's an attorney in Georgia for an auto import company, and she is required, her stores, that she's a compliance officer, she goes and makes sure the stores are all compliant with the law, and they are required, if anybody pays cash for a vehicle, they're required to report that to the law, and that is for the purpose, ostensible purpose of catching people that are laundering money and committing drug crimes. But they're going after ordinary businesses and people who deposit $9,000 instead of $10,000 and assuming that they've committed some kind of crime, they're laundering money. And so basically what Charles Murray is saying is they're not going to go after everybody who commits civil disobedience, like people who are opposed to what the B.L.M.'s doing. They may go after some, but they can't go after everybody. And so he's calling for all of us to stand against the government when they overstep their bounds.
I appreciate that. Again, that kind of goes back to where I said is that your freedom is going to be preserved in this day and time by the individual. The purpose of the politician, in my view at this time, is the honorable politician, the one with character, the one that will stand, is to help educate, use his position to help voice and educate the public on the stand that the people, we the people, are standing on, because they're not going to change it, but they can help by being honorable and giving voice to freedom.
Okay, thank you so much for the call. You had talked before about, and I agree with you on this, solving it legislatively or by litigation is a losing game. It is going to take people who have the backbone to, number one, understand what is right, and then stand for it, even if it costs them. And I want to get you, we've got about 2 minutes before we got to go to a break here, but Phil Lyman and the Recapture Canyon ride. Now, he's a political leader.
Yes,
but
county commissioner.
Yeah, county commissioner over in San Juan County.
I believe so.
What is your take on, I mean, they went ahead and did the ride. He was hauled before a federal court and apparently convicted of conspiracy and I don't know what else.
Yes. You know, I watched this after we had the Bundyville standoff, Bunkerville standoff. I watched, you know, people kind of take courage and they begin to do this Recapture Canyon ride, and I had such a disconcerting feeling about it, and this was my concern. My concern was that they were going to stand up and make a stand and voice it, and then at the last moment when the pressure would come, that they would fold. And I talked with Phil Lyman on the phone, trying to give him, after he was convicted, to just kind of give him some encouragement and stuff. Now, let's go back to the principles here. What is the proper government over that land? It's the county. Who is the elected official over that land? It's Phil Lyman. He's the commissioner. Who's supposed to be the teeth behind that? Well, it's the county sheriff. So what happened was they made their stand. They tore the gate down and they rode through the canyon saying this right of way belongs to the county. It was here before the federal government. It's ours. And they made the run through it, and B.L.M. just stood back and watched and took names. And then they took him to court. And I told Phil, I says, this is the mistake you made. You are the proper governmental figure, and you then stepped into federal court and responded to their lawsuit against you. You should never have responded to that. When you step back in that federal court, you say, yes, in fact, federal government, you do have right to sit in judgment on me over this land. And therefore, you give back to an illegitimate entity power by folding. So don't stand unless you're willing to see it to the bitter end. And I said, you know, Phil, I'll come back to that later. Sound like the music's playing.
Okay, yeah, we're headed for a break. Okay, thanks for sticking with me for another segment here. LaVoy Finicum is my guest. You are not going to want to miss this. Stand by.
This is the HD Radio Show. Attention citizen, we are officially leaving the 3x5 index card of approved opinions.
Do you even know what you just said? Oh, great Odin's Raven.
Welcome to the HD Radio Show with Brian Hyde.
Hey, good afternoon. Welcome to the HD Radio Show. Just for those who may have tuned in a little bit late, my guest today has been LaVoy Finicum. He is a rancher down on the Arizona part of the Arizona Strip, and we've been talking about a lot of different issues. I think those of you who've been tuned in from the start will understand you now have one of the most complete pictures of what exactly was Cliven Bundy standing for when he fired the B.L.M. however many years ago and refused to keep paying grazing fees to them. And we have talked about those grazing rights. We've talked about how they are real and natural rights. In other words, they are independent of man-made law or the Constitution. And I think, LaVoy, the big surprise that may have surprised some people is when you stood up and said, and even though you are on very good terms with the Bureau of Land Management and the people who have been managing, the land that you operate on, you will be severing your ties with the BLM. You're doing this amicably, but you're doing it on a principle.
Yes.
And that principle is
that natural right, that the federal government has no right to control these lands. The responsibility is to dispose of that back to the states, to the people. And they have violated that, and they intend to hold on to it and to keep it. They tie up great wealth. 30% of this land mass of America is bigger than many European nations combined. And the wealth within this land is amazing. As a young kid, I worked on some of the Wildcat rigs, the uranium rigs down there in Hacks Canyon. And that uranium is some of the richest in the whole world. And so the environmentalists will get upset. Well, you can't disturb it. That mining is so friendly to the environment. Once they do the reclamation, you can't tell that there was a mine there. It's subterranean. They go down in, mine out those breccia pipes, bring out that high-grade uranium, and so those rights are trampled on there. They've shut it down. And Fredonia used to be a thriving town with lumber, with an oil refinery, with mining, with ranching, and there was a different feel to it, and so much of the production of that small town has been gutted.
Yep. I've thought about it as I've driven through, and what happened here. Mm-hmm. Why is it so sad? Yeah. Okay, I want to take a caller. We got Jeremy standing by, 844-805-TALK. Jeremy, you have a question for LaVoy?
I do, Brian. How are you?
Fantastic. Thank you.
I was wondering, in light of the 9th and especially the 10th Amendment that reserved the right, not specifically enumerated to the government, to the federal government, I should say, to the states and to the people, what role does Mr. Finicum see that the state, whether it's the state government of Arizona or Utah or Nevada or whoever, should be playing in this in order to restore these lands to state and to the control of the citizens?
I thank you for your question. You might ask yourself, what right does the federal government have in your home, your domicile? That right doesn't exist. That's yours. That's your property right. And it doesn't matter whether it's a state or a county. Those rights exist. Now, you have a responsibility, and a county, a state has the ability to level taxes for the support of the state and the county. And as producers in that county, we have a responsibility to be able to be subject unto taxes and to pay what is levied against our production. But the state doesn't own, nor does the county own, the grazing right. It's the same whether it's federal, state, or county. But we do have a responsibility to pay for our local governments.
I guess what I'm driving at is, does the state, Arizona or Utah, do they have a role to play in restoring these lands to the states and then to the individual citizens?
Oh, in my view, absolutely. Will they? I doubt it. The states need to stand up and defend the 10th Amendment. This is theirs, and they're letting it go. Unfortunately, so many of the state legislatures really believe in the federal overreach, and so when we changed, I believe it was the 17th Amendment, where senators were no longer elected by the state legislature. Yeah. That laid the groundwork to undercut the rights of the states, and so that needs to be repealed, but it won't be.
I'll tell you the other really big challenge, and I think Ryan knows this. I happen to be a bureaucrat. I work for a state agency. Our state government, roughly 38% is funded by federal government.
Yes.
So it's hard to, bite the hand that feeds you, so to speak.
and that is by purpose. When they can get us as a state or as a county or as a sheriff department receiving the grants from the federal government. See, they have a press. They're not constrained by a budget. Then we begin to take these handouts. Then all of a sudden we begin to grow our own personal budget, whether it's state, county, to depend upon these federal grants. And all of a sudden we're beholden to that hand that's feeding us. And it is so hard to begin to cut off the gravy train standing on principle.
So even though this state lives within its means are derived, a large part from somebody else, from some taxpayer in Minnesota or Florida or wherever.
And that is unjust. There's no way that somebody in Michigan should be having their hard-earned money taken from them in taxes and sent out here to Mojave County to help support the sheriff department here. That is unjust. It is a violation of the federal government. They have no right in doing that, but it's called the power of the purse, or they're able to buy their compliance with that money.
All right, it's a sticky situation.
Yes, it is.
Thanks so much for the call, Jeremy. All right, so it comes down to the individual, is what you're saying, LaVoy, and I agree with you. The legislative, the judicial way, or the litigation way of doing it, always seems to play in favor of those who are doing the abusing and not observing the laws or observing the proper limits of government. One thing that I know you have emphasized, and again, I want to give you the chance for anybody who didn't hear this, you are not talking about grab your pitchforks, grab your torches, and we're going to take up arms against the B.L.M. This is a defensive move.
Yeah, anybody that advocates aggression towards the federal government or the B.L.M. or the Forest Service, come on, you're in the wrong. You once you cross that line and become aggressive towards them, you're in the wrong. You are to defend your life, liberty, and property. You're not to attack another person's life, liberty, or property. And so anybody that you find in your midst, in your organization, that is kind of bombastic, is just out there on the edge and starts advocating, let's go do something, this ain't right, you better take a close look at that person. Either he's very misguided or he's a plant and an agitator.
Yep. That's, that used to be the old saying back 20 years ago when, all the militia groups were meeting. How can you spot the FBI provocateur? He's the guy who's starting to advocate, hey, guys, let's go blow something up or let's go do something illegal.
Yeah, and I know for the fact that the federal government has deep pockets and they have plenty of agents here amongst us, and I know this. So be wise. Don't be stupid. It's easy to be stupid, and sometimes it's not too hard to be smart.
Okay, we got to take a very quick break. Back with more right after this. Good afternoon and welcome to the HD Radio Show. We are on a never-ending quest for clarity. I think we got more than the lion's share of it today. LaVoy Finicum has been my guest, and I'll tell you, I don't think I have ever heard a more clear explanation of the kind of rights that we are dealing with when it comes to grazing rights and forage rights and water rights and natural rights that are not dependent upon man-made law or dependent upon government, but are ours through self-evidence.
Right.
And this has been extremely informative. I thought I had a pretty good understanding, but you've put some real clarity into it, and I really thank you for that.
You're welcome. And believe me, this is just an opportunity for people to stand up for the freedoms of everyone, because your rights are under assault in many areas. For example, is your body yours? Do your kids belong to you? Apparently, there are those who feel that your body doesn't belong to you, that your kids don't belong to you, and that you must be accountable to a federal government for these things. And so the squeeze will continue, and at some point, you have to stand up in your own sphere, in your own place, for your own rights. those children are your children. You're the one responsible for educating them, for feeding them, for taking care of them, for their health care. Those are your responsibilities and your rights.
Okay. And for those who may have joined us late, something that LaVoy has made clear every step of the way, number one, you have good friends who work for the BLM. You
Yes.
have a very good working relationship
Yes.
with the BLM.
Yes.
This is not a call to arms against the BLM.
No, and I think there was a caller that dropped off, had to go, that I think his question was, when do we have a right to pick up arms against the federal government? Again, believe me, I am not advocating us to pick up arms to hurt anybody's life, their liberty, or their property. You got to remember those. Those are the things. The principles are simple in freedom. If I'm not breaking your leg or picking your pocket, it's not your business. And if you're not breaking my leg or picking my pocket, your business is not my business. And my property is my property. Your property is your property. And it's the principles are simple. They like to get them convoluted and to go in different directions. Now,
We've got limited time here in the few moments that we have, but I want to take a little moment here to talk about, there was a lot of media coverage. I know that there's a lot of media disinformation, and even some people who originally were calling attention to the situation with Clive and Bundy ended up backtracking and
Yes.
walking it back, Glenn Beck being among them. What are your thoughts on what Brother Beck, I'm sorry, that's my nickname for him,
Okay.
about what he did in terms of the Bundy coverage?
I'm actually glad you brought that up, because it's been a source of discussion between me and my daughters who were there, not on that day, but the days prior to that. I actually spoke to Glenn Beck personally the day afterwards, and I explained to him what we did as Cowboys. And I thought he had a clear understanding that we weren't trying to just pick a fight, and that we were standing for rights, and somewhere that got lost. And my concern is I don't want to call into question Beck's integrity. And my daughters, they defend him. They says, well, Dad, I just think he doesn't understand. I think he just wasn't there. I think he just doesn't understand. But nobody could have hurt us as ranchers and Cliven, nor put more of their life at risk, in my belief, than Glenn Beck. In the political terms, it's important that you kill the man's reputation before you take him out, and that's important. And Beck was very clear at finally one point that if anybody had, he posted this, that if anybody had spiritual eyes, they needed to run away from these people, and they needed to loop over and over again, where the Bundys were stopping that dump truck and said, well, look how angry they are. No wonder that dog's acting the way they're acting, And I think he just didn't understand, and personally, I call out to you, Glenn Beck, Mr. Beck, to let us sit down, you and I, and have a face-to-face conversation. Let's go over these things. It's okay if you disagree with me. It's okay if you think I'm misguided. It's okay if you think that I do not have the correct interpretation of the Constitution or natural rights. But let's have a civil face-to-face conversation. And we can clarify where we agree, and we can clarify where we disagree. But boy, so many good people that have relied on you for giving us information, and me being one of them. I'm so appreciative of what you've done in educating us in so many ways. And I've defended you on the public airways against those who are besmirching your character and stuff. But look, my daughters and I ride that range out there at Trumbull. We're 50 miles out on dirt road. It takes an hour and a half to 2 hours out. There are federal rangers out there. We're not right by a freeway where we get a quick response if we need help. There's only me and them, my daughters, when the federal agents confront us. And I have been confronted just this year with federal agents out there. And if the country sees me and Cliven as just radicals and stuff, the federal government is emboldened to continue to move forward. And so how about you and I sit down and just have a conversation?
Wow. My hat goes off to you. And for those who may have tuned in late, LaVoy has talked about how you will be severing your ties with the BLM. You will be instead paying a 2.5%. What kind of fee is it?
Production tax.
Production tax.
Yeah, off of by gross
to your county for the livestock that you've raised. In other words, you're being a good steward. You intend to be a good steward. You just won't be using the BLM as your landlord.
The county has the right to tax us. We have a right to. We have a responsibility to support our local government, and that I'm willing to do, and I want to do. But when we continue to operate within the frameworks that the BLM has set out, we give power to an illegitimate agency. And so that's the line upon which I'm standing.
And you are not alone. I understand there are other ranchers who will also be making that stand, but this is what it comes down to: the individual citizen who is willing to stand up and say,
yes,
enough. On this principle, I will stand, and knowing full well it puts a target on you.
Yes. There are some good cowboys up in central southern Utah that have committed to make the same stand. And so when you start getting, right now they have Clive and Bundy pushed off in a corner and demonized through the success of the media, and they're not going to let it rest. But right now they've got him contained. But if you have other ranchers that start standing up and rattling the cage, again, let's go back to this. You better not make the stand unless you're willing to ride this horse to the end. And it may cost you everything, but that's okay. I want to kind of end a little bit with a story. Christmas morning, Christmas Eve, there was a gentleman that I have great respect for called George Washington. He crossed the Delaware with his soldiers. And he took on the Hessians, the British Hessians, and he lost not one soldier to the armed conflict. There was 150 that were wounded, but he did lose two that died before they even got there. 2 men froze to death before they arrived there, and the bloody foot tracks could be traced in the snow. Now, why is my life more valuable than their life? They gave their all, didn't even get a chance to fire their musket. They died frozen. I'm sure they had loved ones, mothers, fathers, probably children, that their dreams were cut off, but they gave their all for this freedom. Why do we reap the fruits and the rewards of their sacrifices, and then when it comes down to this time that we don't stand up? Will you be able to hold your head up? Will I be able to hold my head up when we meet together? If I don't stand, I can't. They gave everything, and so many people have given everything. It's time to stand. I want anybody that hears this, please pull your courage to the sticking point. Strengthen your resolve. Stiffen your back. Let's stand. It may cost you your life. That's okay. Just like I said to that cowboy, we all die. Die for something good. Let your children, your posterity know where you stood, where you stand. Don't disappoint your ancestors. This is the day, the time.
You've written a book. Let's take a couple of minutes. Well, actually, a couple of seconds. We got about 30 seconds here, but tell me about the book you've written. We may have to do a follow-up show, actually, to talk about this.
It's called Only by Blood and Suffering, Restoring Lost Freedoms. And the left is so good about putting an emotional slant on the left. This is an emotional novel about defending freedom on the right.
Okay. Is it something that will be available here
It
locally?
just got published. It's on Amazon last Saturday, and it's going to be in the bookstores, and it's set in this area. So if you want, and it's going to cause you to think. There's no right or wrong answer in this book. It'll cause you to think.
We will be doing another show. LaVoy, thank you so much. I can't thank you enough for coming on today.
Oh, you're welcome, Brian. Thank you.